Ubisoft began their rise with the incredible first Assassin's Creed. That game showed a company with a commitment to creativity and a company that had a bright future ahead. However, today with Ubisoft's newest limp onto the market, we now see a wounded lion, a once proud beast that is now clinging to any relevance they may or may not even have at this point. Ubisoft is a company in crisis. Poor leadership and uninspired games have led a company with some of the best franchises in gaming to the brink of collapse. Assassin's Creed Mirage showcases the myriad of problems that Ubisoft has in game design and development itself. However, Mirage also shows that Ubisoft needs to start thinking of their future and where exactly they are going. Today, I wanted to take a look at these things and talk about Ubisoft's present and their future. Let's get started. Mirage is the perfect symbol for present-day Ubisoft. The entire time I played it, I felt nothing. And honestly, that feels like it's by design. Mirage is the definition of a sterile product. When Ubisoft Bordeaux, the studio behind Mirage, heard they were getting the chance to bring medieval Baghdad, one of the most important epicenters of cultural and scientific progression, to life, their first thoughts were to make a few journal entries for you to read. There is no attempt to dive into the historical record, at least try to bring forward that culture in the environment. Mostly because when you try and bring in a historical culture, you need to show the good, the bad, and the ugly. And modern day Ubisoft will never show any artistic boldness and try to confront the negatives of this culture while celebrating their contributions. Mirage is set during the Abbasid Caliphate, and the era in which this group held power was considered the Islamic Golden Age, and it simply isn't represented well enough here. The visuals are uninspired and never showcase a civilization at the height of their power. The NPC models seem more akin to high school stage play costumes, and the characters you meet, historical or otherwise, are simply skin-deep stand-ins for the people they represent. Ubisoft today is a company with no interest in taking advantage of their settings and backgrounds. So what I mean to say is that Ubisoft can't spot an opportunity when they have one. I wonder what other aspects that could affect. When I heard Mirage would be a scaled-down game, I immediately thought that Ubisoft would take advantage of this. With a scaled-down game comes the opportunity to provide depth in other areas of your game. Yet, somehow Ubisoft Bordeaux saw no need to even bother trying to achieve this. Gameplay aspects are scaled down even further, and even less depth than Ubisoft's previous titles like Odyssey, which was a much larger game. The gameplay wanted to harken back to the earliest Assassin's Creed games, yet Ubisoft shows they don't understand their own games whatsoever. In Assassin's Creed 1 and 2, we get a mix of simple combat systems alongside interesting stories and the amazing representations of historical places and people. Yet, Mirage didn't feel the need to broach any of this. It's apparent that Ubisoft Bordeaux was told to make something they themselves didn't understand, nor maybe even wanted to make. Mirage is the product of a studio that wants to continue working on Odyssey-like titles, but are now being told to make games similar to their mid to late 2000s predecessors. It shows a severe misunderstanding by the Ubisoft leadership in which they see the need to take a new creative direction, yet can't or won't take the time necessary to make that change possible. If Ubisoft Bordeaux is well versed in their ability to make the latest type of Assassin's Creed games, then you need to give them the time to transition over to a new style. I think I know exactly why Ubisoft won't do this, but we'll touch on that later. Finishing off this section, the quest designs still revolve around these ancient MMO-inspired busy work quests, i.e. you bring me X number of things and I will give you reward number 3,489. They're far too simple to work with this new direction. Heck, even awesome ideas like the notoriety system forcing you to reckon with your actions aren't deep enough to influence my decision-making outside of tearing down a few posters here or there. Simply put, Ubisoft is a company that shows they can't realize opportunities in their smaller projects, nor are they competent enough to actually correct their current issues. So Mirage now shows not only the studios themselves are in a potential state of flux, but also shows Ubisoft themselves are out of touch with the current gaming market. Though the other aspect of this, I think, honestly shows why Ubisoft are in the state that they're in, why their studios are not allowed to transition creatively in their game design. But don't take my word for it, Ubisoft themselves spoke on the absolute chaos descending upon their offices, which was definitely not self-inflicted whatsoever. In an article back in May 5th, Ubisoft themselves spoke on what Mirage represented for them as a company, and the key word was redemption. Ubisoft has had a tumultuous time, to say the least. Jason Schreier, an awesome gaming journalist, covered the sexual misconduct allegations levied at many Ubisoft executives, which recently ended up with 5 former Ubisoft executives being arrested and several other employees being detained in relation to these allegations. The culture of Ubisoft has been toxic, to say the least, leading to most likely an exodus of creative talent from the company itself. Then, not to mention the dire financial straits Ubisoft find themselves in, dating back to January and as recently as March of this year. In January, we saw Ubisoft cancel 3 titles / financial targets signaling their weakening financial state, and then in March, posted another record operating loss, losing 550 million euros or 500 million US dollars, which from January they stated they would see. This loss comes from Ubisoft trying to drag themselves out of their pit by investing in research and development for the games, but these expenses most likely won't see large enough returns in the near future to at least recoup these losses. This report also came with more talent loss, dropping below 20,000 employees. Then of course, the cherry on top, Ubisoft also planned on investing back into their Ghostwriter program, an AI tool to write first drafts for them. Yeah, the future looks bright for Ubisoft. But in the near future of Ubisoft also seems incredibly bleak. Now we don't know the Mirage sales numbers just yet, so leave that to the side. However, Skull and Bones being heavily delayed because the creative team behind the game received massive critical feedback on the state of the game's features, and the upcoming Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, Ubisoft is being very tight-lipped with that project, with many journalists stating they are getting very worried about whether the end product will impress whatsoever. Ubisoft is currently in a bad spot, to be generous. They have to, on one hand, change creative directions with many of their properties, yet do so with less money, and then try to replace all the talent they lost due to their own mismanagement of their culture. So, what do? Well, I think Ubisoft are already trying to do the only thing that they can do. The rumors of it have been swirling. Ubisoft needs to sell immediately. In general, when looking at Ubisoft, what would you get if you were to purchase them? Namely, you will get a fantastic set of IPs, which hopefully haven't been ruined by Ubisoft. You get Assassin's Creed, the Tom Clancy name, Splinter Cell, Far Cry, just to name a few. Who would want all this? Obviously, there are a few contenders. Xbox and Sony are your usual suspects, and even EA, if rumors are to be believed, even though the thought of that makes most of us want to vomit. Obviously. Of course, we can't rule out other newcomers to the scene who could see a company they could get on the cheap to get their start in the market, for instance. But how can I speculate on who should buy Ubisoft? Are they even in the market to sell at this point? Well, yeah, and it ain't going well. From an article in January, Ubisoft spoke with a few buyers about potential mergers and acquisitions and were, quote, laughed at. Yeah. This reaction is because many in the industry apparently see Ubisoft as an albatross not worth the purchase price, and this makes sense. Buying Ubisoft becomes a project rather than an immediate money make. On one hand, you need to rehabilitate a brand marred by a toxic culture. Second, you need to rehabilitate the IP's prestige back to where they were. Then third, you need to find new talent that then needs to be retrained in your new creative design direction. Because you can't have the existing people, with what little were left, keep doing what they were doing, because obviously that wasn't working. So obviously, Ubi needs a change in leadership, but they got such a stink coming off them that it makes anyone with money think that just burning their money for Tinder would be a better investment. But that doesn't mean no one is in a good position to buy them. So now, with all that information, who will buy Ubisoft? But more importantly, who even benefits from buying this brand? And to upset more Xbox fans, no, Xbox should not touch Ubisoft. Xbox is in a shaky state already. They just now managed to release an exclusive that was functional. Second, Xbox needs to stabilize by getting games out for their system and making more money now, not by investing in a long-term project like Ubisoft. Third, personally, Xbox just kind of sucks at this whole thing, but it's my personal opinion. Now, could Electronic Arts come in and give it a go? They are currently seeing a great financial growth, and they have shown an ability to cultivate games in a similar genre and design to Ubisoft titles, but I don't see it either for EA. EA currently has momentum to run with. There's no reason for them to take a big gamble on a brand that hasn't shown an ability to put out great games, and is currently in turmoil at this point. And of course, we all know EA would buy everything out and then shut down the studios just to get the IPs anyway, so no one else can use those brands. That's a no-go. The entire gaming community is going to want to put a veto on that. That leaves one, Sony and PlayStation. And yeah, they should buy Ubisoft. Firstly, Sony and PlayStation are in a fantastic financial spot to take on a project at this point. They just reported that they're raising their profit forecast in an upward revision of 7%, for PS5 specifically. Further, they're in a great spot with a larger market share than its other two competitors, Nintendo and Xbox, with many business minds touting that PlayStation is in a crazy strong state at the top of the console world. Second, PlayStation has shown an ability to cultivate and develop their exclusives. When they announce something, it's gonna release, and they're usually bangers. Third, most importantly, PlayStation is heavily involved in making their games they invest in are of a higher quality. This helps ensure the games are sufficient and then improved upon. And the most fun, of course, could you imagine Sucker Punch making an Assassin's Creed or a Splinter Cell game? Think of the stories that could be told by Naughty Dog with these IPs, or what Insomniac, who just made the Ratchet and Clank game, would do with these brands. Everything is lined up for Sony and PlayStation to buy Ubisoft. They have the means, a great motive, and the stability to actually use these brands well. All in all, Ubisoft is in dire straits. They know they need to sell, because if AC Mirage is the best we're getting out of them, then we don't need any more evidence. All in all, I personally would love to see PlayStation get them. It just makes too much sense right now for them, and to see these brands be used in creative ways again would be absolutely fantastic. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, this is the first one out of the new recording space. That looks nice back there, huh? It looks super nice. If you like the video, sub and like the video, even dislike it. YouTube doesn't care as long as you're hitting buttons, I guess. You can compliment me on my massive forehead. I've been working on it. Thanks, guys. Or I've seen this one a lot. You can make fun of my frizzy man bun. It does get frizzy. I have very curly hair, and these lights are very hot. And I decide to wear hoodies when I'm recording because I'm a freaking moron. But yeah, like the video, subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at Braden Voice, BRAYDEN Voice. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye. We'll be right back.